very grateful, we're very grateful to be joined by Bhavesh. And so, yeah, could you give us a quick intro, Bhavesh, and then tell us all about your experience, well, your knowledge of SEIS and EIS, please.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Bhavesh, co-founder of BGS Accounting. So BGS Accounting kind of set up 3 years ago. So we're a startup in ourselves to a certain extent. So I understand kind of the pains and pitfalls of what everyone goes through as a startup. In terms of the SEIS EIS environment, we've worked with a number of companies trying to get advanced assurance through HMRC, and we're able to assist companies to do that. The presentation today is literally, for people that don't know what EIS and SEIS is, it's just a bit of an introduction to the schemes available and what the tax benefits are and how you go about getting involved and trying to get that status. So any questions from anyone at the moment? Just kind of put your hand up or shout.
Yeah, I should have mentioned actually, Bhavesh, the chat's open. So you've got a presentation. So if we could go through that, and then, but if something pops into mind, put it in the chat and we'll pick it up at the end of the presentation. Yeah,
sure. Okay, right. Fine. So I'm just going to kind of go through the presentation now. As like Sam's mentioned, if you've got any questions, put it in the chat, and then I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. So I'll just share the screen now and just confirm that everyone's. This is just the front page. It's just myself and Govinda, my business partner. So carry on. So the content of the website, I'll just go through the content. I've kind of touched upon it anyway. So I'll introduce myself and BGS Accounting, what an EIS and SEIS is, why is it beneficial, how to obtain it, and kind of what are the tax implications available and what are the tax benefits available to you. We'll touch on a couple of things. I know Sam recently kind of invested in this as well, so we'll touch on as to why he did and what was appealing to him a bit later on. So a bit about BGS Accounting. We formed, like I said, 3 years ago. Myself and Gubbs have known each other for about 20 years now, and we were in between jobs. And over a beer, like most good things happen, we decided to form BGS Accounting. 80% of our client base is either a startup or a tech business. So we know the industry, we know the environment that all of you are working in. Our main thing is to be a trusted business partner to our clients. We're both Govinda and I are both chartered certified accountants, which is the ACCA. We've got a lot of industry knowledge behind us in terms of some big name players like Mattioli Woods, Emerson, Goodyear, Santander. And what we do as a practice is we do help clients with R&D tax credits and SEIS and EIS applications. So just a bit about what an EIS is. Developed by the government to help high-risk companies. And a lot of the benefits involved are to the investor as well as the person, the company that's looking for investment. For example, with EIS, there's an income tax relief of 30%. There's capital gains tax relief, 2 sets, inheritance tax relief and loss relief available. I'll go through a few examples on this further on in the presentation. So here we are. So just a working example of how EIS works. So this assumes that an individual invests £10,000 and is an income tax rate payer of 45%. And so he's a high rate taxpayer in essence. With EIS, the individual that's invested will get a £3,000 relief in income tax. And then depending on, as everyone's aware, these are not necessarily high risk investments, but they're startup investments. So they could go a number of ways. So scenario one, if the company was to fail and the shares that you bought were worth 0, rather than making a £10,000 loss on it, you'd actually only make 3,850. And the reason why that is, this is due to the income tax relief that you get for the 3,000, as well as the loss relief that you've got on the investment. If the company was to break even and you sold your shares, you've already claimed the £3,000 in income tax relief, and you'll get your £10,000 for the shares that you sold. So in essence, you've made £3,000 tax-free. And this is what everyone wants. If the company doubles or triples in value, the shares are now worth £20,000. You don't pay any CGT on that as long as you've held them for 3 years, and you'll receive 13K tax-free as an increase to your capital. Just going on what SEIS is. This was introduced by HMRC in April 2012, and is to help once again small and companies to raise funds. This is a bit more beneficial to the investor, where you get more of a tax relief. So income tax, rather than 30%, it's at 50%. And like with the other one, you can get capital gains tax relief and inheritance tax relief as well. So I'll go through a bit of a scenario like I did with EIS as well, using the same type of numbers. So scenario one, once again, you're a higher rate taxpayer, you've invested £10,000, and scenario one, it's failed. However, whereas with the EIS, it was a loss of 3,250. Here, it's a loss of 2,750. If the company was to break even, due to the 50% tax allowance that you get, you've made £5,000 tax-free. And with scenario three, if it was to double in value, you would have made £15,000 tax-free. And that's getting your £5,000 tax allowance, as well as your money for the shares that have doubled in value. There's this is a bit of a complex area, and there's a lot of requirements to tick in order to get EIS and SEIS status. And this is just a bit of a handful of what you need to do. If anyone wanted to go into a bit more detail, then I'm going to leave my contact details at the end. Just drop me a note, drop me an email, or give me a call, and I can explain in a bit more detail for you. So kind of just on the snapshot, they have to be unquoted companies, must carry out trading, qualifying trade. There's a lot of things which doesn't classify as qualifying trade, and I've included that on the list below. So myself, I wouldn't be included because I'll be providing accountancy services. Anyone in the financial advice area wouldn't work either. But in terms of whether it's a tech startup business or something like that, or a fintech business, that you could apply for EIS status. So when applying for the status, there's a lot of forms to fill in, and it's always good to get input in terms of whether it's from an accountant or someone that's done this before, in terms of what you need to get advance assurance from HMRC. And there's a tick box exercise that you need to do to make sure that any accountant that you go to can do this. It's normally a 30-day turnaround to get advance assurance. However, if there's something missing or the details aren't up to date, then it can take longer. So this is just a quick snapshot of what you'd need. As I stated before, in terms of the eligibility, it has to be a qualifying company. It has to be eligible shares. You will need a detailed business plan and cash flow, but I imagine you would have this to a certain extent when you're going out to investors anyway. So we could use your investor pack to a certain extent to get HMRC advance assurance. So how to apply for the assurance? You'd issue your shares. You'd complete a compliance statement, which the accountant could help you on, or there's other companies that can help in that environment. And then you send your application to HMRC. Once you've got that, it's important, once you've received your letter of compliance certificate, that's what your investors will need so they can claim their tax benefits, with whether it's the 30% or the 50%. And then this is just what we do, and this is just as our contact details, as I mentioned. It's got my email, and I'll put this on the chat if anyone needs it. So we're just based in the dock in Leicester, which is once again like a kind of innovation hub, as they like to call it, with loads of tech companies and startup companies within here. So that's kind of the presentation. If any, I'll just check on the chat to see if anyone's got it.
Yeah, we've got one in there. I'll read it out for you if you like. Is it only individuals who are in the higher tax rate bracket that can invest?
No. So anyone can invest. And I just did it in terms of the higher rate tax bracket because that shows the kind of the most benefit you would get. So even if you was a 20 rate taxpayer, you would get a benefit. It just wouldn't be as much as the higher rate taxpayer. Makes sense? Yeah.
And this probably could segue. One of the things I wanted to talk with you today is, so we have a community of entrepreneurs, founders, all at different stages, some going through investment. We've got Thomas on the call at the moment, some that are thinking about it. And what I hadn't realized until quite recently is, and I'm a bit ashamed of this, if I'm honest with you, is how accessible this, the SEIS scheme is. And I was, and I think I took advantage of an opportunity. One of our community members recently. It was really simple, really quick. In fact, it was all done through SEIS Legals. I'm sure there are other providers, but it surprised me how how simple the process was. And I must admit, I haven't got through the other bit where I need to inform. I need to look into this. Maybe we can get into it. The HMRC bit. You know how you make the claim or register. I understand SEIS Legals does most of it, automated tool. But so. Hypothetically, is there could you give us an example of an investment that you've been involved in recently? Obviously, not mentioning any names, keeping it completely. But can you think of an example where an individual, not necessarily higher rate taxpayer, has put in a small amount? I think sometimes they're called micro investment, 1,000, 5,000, whatever, and the time scales and what I know you talked a bit about it, but just what that might look like, what it involves, and anything else around the risks. And I know the startups obviously have their process that they like to go through. And in case I gave it SEIS Legals, but any just a practical example, I suppose.
Sure, yeah. So a couple of the companies that we work for, I won't mention any names, but they have gone through this process where they've invested. A couple of the individuals, have invested in a couple of software companies. And the way it works is you'd make the investment, and then on your self-assessment, once you've got your certificate, so you'd have to fill a self-assessment in, and on your self-assessment, once we got the certificate, we can claim the tax rebate on that. So you'd have to register for, if you're not already registered for self-assessment, which unless you're within got additional income, you might not. We'd have to register for a self-assessment, which we'll and then. So the tax year for self-assessments are from 6th of April to 5th of April the following year. And then you don't have to submit that tax return until January the year after. So, but with the investment, you have to make sure you get the certificate. And once you've got the certificate, which says that it's SEIS, EIS, that's how we can claim that back. So it all depends on whether you've ticked a few boxes already in terms of you've already registered for self-assessment, because that can take anything up to 3 weeks to get a personal UTR, and then give the money to the investor, the company that you're investing in, and make sure you get the certificate. And then depending on when the tax year falls, we'll do this self-assessment return for that.
Got it. And how common in your experience is I'm going to use the term micro investing bit again, so you aggregate together, perhaps, I don't know, 100 people contributing £1,000 each. You've got your 100,000 seed investment. Is that? I mean, are you aware?
I think it does happen. But I've not been involved in that kind of level, but it does happen, and it's a good way for. It's like a syndicate investment and such. Albeit I don't think they like calling it that, but it's a syndicate investment in terms of, like you said, micro investors all kind of putting their monies together to get invest in the company. And it's all depending on the round of funding and how much you want to kind of raise at a certain round of funding. So I've not had experience with a lot of micro investors in that sense, where there's a number of them. A couple of our kind of clients have invested in other companies up to 5, 10, 15K, but they're not part of a bigger kind of syndicate, as it were.
Right. So it sounds like almost the equivalent of a sort of informal group of.
Yeah, they're like an informal group of investors. And I know we touched upon this kind of prior to the call, where how do we get the companies that want this investment in front of them? And I think that's the difficulty in terms of a group. If there were a group of 10 people that were looking to invest 10K each, how do we get the startup companies in front of them so they can have that option? And I know you do something with that in terms of the stuff that you do already, in terms of the kind of the accelerator program and things like that.
Yeah. So I feel like I'm hijacking this. I've got to get into some.
That's fine.
Right. So we've got some questions in the chat. Right. Next one. How much do you charge for assisting a company to apply for the scheme?
So our charges. So there's a couple of things that you have to do, and in terms to get the advance assurance, ours will be £500 plus VAT.
Right.
And that would be kind of assisting with all the paperwork, making sure that the business plan's tight, making sure the forecasts are all relevant and in line. And so there are charges for that. I think that, like you said, there are other providers, and Seed Legal is probably one of the biggest ones in this environment. And they would do something similar.
Got it. Thank you for giving examples elsewhere.
That's fine. That's fine.
Got a question from Jim Shields, one of our outstanding mentors and community members. As a potential investor, explain to me the rounds of investment. So seed, ground 2, etc. Presumably it's better to invest earlier rather than later.
So obviously I can't give financial advice. That's not what I do. But I imagine if you get in earlier, the price that you pay will be a bit cheaper. And that's kind of the thing there. But I suppose it swings and roundabouts. It's how much are you willing to risk to get a return? And if it's already kind of got past the seed funding and it's on the second stage, and you can see that there's a product, or they're close to the product selling and revenue streams, it would be better and possibly more expensive to get that second round of funding.
Got it. And that's one of the things we try to do with the startups we're working with, is get them to the point where they've got some useful metrics rather than vanity metrics. You know, how many paying customers have you got, and is it increasing? And then that becomes an easier task for an investor to assess the sort of the size of the investment or the equity that's up for offer. Right. How retail investors can invest in? How can retail investors invest in these schemes? So I think, well, we've already talked about that. But is there anything else? So, you know, regular tax-paying folks. You know, it is something that we're going to look at for Leicester startups. It'll probably be next year before we do anything meaningful. But we want to try and we've already got the exciting startups that we're working with, and we want to try and activate more people. Hopefully locally, doesn't have to be though, to think about, to consider micro investing. I mean, even as low as £500 potentially. So yeah, that's something, that's the direction of travel we're going in, but it'll be a while. But are you aware of, I suppose answering this question, other initiatives elsewhere? And I can think of Crowdcube, for example, crowdfunding. You know, you can put relatively small amounts in exchange for equity into those. Anything else from your side?
No, I think, like you mentioned, I think it's an area which I think you will see growth in, because not everyone has got £5,000, £10,000 to invest, and I do think the micro funding area will grow. And like you mentioned, crowdfunding, which is probably one of the main players in the market. I do think we'll see more of those become established in terms of getting more investment from micro investors, as you call it.
Yeah, I have come across other ones, especially on Product Hunt. You know, every once in a while you see, but you know, I'm always a bit dubious about how sustainable. They there's some minimum viable product that's gone the next week.
Yeah, and that's the scary thing with any of this. To be fair, is we don't know how long they will last.
Yeah,
etc. So
you definitely talked about it in your presentation, but it is incredibly risky, and the statistics vary. But I think it's hard to argue, you know, that roughly 80% will fail, go to zero.
Yeah.
Maybe it's 70%, maybe it's 85%. Who knows? But you know, a disproportionate amount will, not this year. But of course, the relationship's built, and you know, these founders often bounce back stronger.
They'll do something different, and that will take off. And that it's about being in the right environment and the right crowd. It's about luck to a certain extent, in terms of if you've got money to invest. The tax breaks are very very good to invest, and it's about investing in the right property, but right software or right product, right company at the right time, isn't it? And you'll only get that if you're in the correct circles.
And it's probably worth having a chat about your involvement as an investor. So I wonder if you've got any thoughts on that. So just because you've put money into the company doesn't mean that you can have a seat at the table and influencing decisions. I mean, it's passive investment in most cases, I would imagine, especially at the micro level. Yeah,
so it is a passive investment. You won't be able to make decisions. That's still on the company, and it is just to. It's, how can I explain it? You're not, like I said, you can't make decisions for the company. It's not. You don't have a controlling interest or anything like that. You're investing for the future growth of the company, but ultimately they'll still be making all the decisions on that.
Yeah,
and that's part of why becoming an investor, you'd have to look at the investment pack, making sure that you're happy with what you're investing in, and making sure that you're happy with the cash flow forecast, the business plan, etc. And any questions you do have, make sure you go to the company and get them kind of make sure you're comfortable with that before you pass any money over.
That's a really important point. I suppose the only time that might not, well, the only time you could have an influence is if you've sort of got a prior arrangement, you know, perhaps sweat equity, or you're already an advisor, mentor to the, you know, the team. But that's, you know, an external that won't sit with your shareholding necessarily.
No, it won't sit with your shareholding. No.
Yeah. That's right. Okay. Right, so I'm ignoring questions again. Let's get away. Right, can you discuss advance assurance for SMEs, please?
Sure. So the advance assurance, and there's a few companies that do this, like I've mentioned already, and that's basically, it's a tick box exercise that HMRC will do to make sure that you meet all the criteria before you do the full application. So it's similar to if you wanted to apply for a loan, and I know you can get pre-approved now without it impacting your credit report, and that's what this advance assurance technically is. I say technically, in a roundabout way, it is via HMRC to say, well, you tick all the boxes in terms of they're not floated on the stock exchange. It's a qualifying trade. It's in the right timeframes, and you've got a business plan, and you've got investors lined up. That advance assurance is very important, because you're not investing more time and money and effort if it's not going to happen. And with that advance assurance, then if it doesn't come back as a yes, we can tweak what we want to, or what they've advised us to, and then go through the process again. But it's pretty much to say you've been, I'll say this in inverted commas because it could change, but it's pre-approved for that status, if that makes sense.
It does. And thanks for asking that question, Ruth. Right, next up. Can I get a grant to buy a property for my business? I don't think there's any scope within SEIS or EIS for that. So I would have thought, I mean, perhaps if you're a charity or a not-for-profit, there might be something if it's a socially minded operation, but I can't think of anything obvious.
Not via this. You'd have to go down the kind of commercial lending route. And I know during COVID, the government had to kind of throw money at it to a certain extent. But there's the not the bounce back loan, because that's gone in the CBILS, but they've got the recovery bounce back loan, which is a new thing. But you'd have to go to your bank and the other providers that would do that. But this SEIS or EIS isn't something that you can do for that.
Got it. Right, next up, does the individual investing have to be a business owner, or can they be an employee or a sole trader? I think we might have already answered that. Literally anyone can take advantage of SEIS as long as you're a tax. Well, perhaps you don't even have to be a taxpayer, but retired folks could even. No, well, they wouldn't then get the. I don't know. Over to you.
So, and I think, like you said, we have touched upon this. Anyone can invest, and the only thing that you'd have to do is make sure you're registered for self-employed. Make sure you're registered to do a self-assessment to be able to claim the tax benefit back.
Right.
And that's all. So anyone can invest. You don't have to be a business owner. You don't have to be a sole trader. You could be an employee of a business and you have some surplus cash you're good at saving, rather than putting in the bank where you don't get any kind of interest rates at the moment. You want to be a bit more risky and look for a return in the next 3 to 5 years, and it's something that you can do. The important thing is just make sure that you get the EIS/SEIS certificate from the company you're doing it for, because that's what your accountant would need to make sure that we can claim the rebate back.
Got it. And you might have done this in your presentation, covered this bit. Apologies if you did. So if you're a startup and you want to offer investment opportunities, become SEIS registered, that, from my memory, that's quite a straightforward process and you would typically do that through your accountant.
Yeah. So sorry, say the question again, Sam.
So if I was a startup and I'm looking to invest, obviously I want to make it as attractive as possible, and I would register as a SEIS approved start. That's not the right word. Yeah, but but the process of registering is quite straightforward, and you typically do it through your accountant.
Yeah, do it through your accountant or Seed Legals, like we've mentioned, and that they can help you with that in terms of assisting you with the business plan, the forecasts, making sure you've got investors lined up and all that kind of stuff.
Got it. Question from Tony. SEIS Advance asks for an initial investor. He doesn't have one. Any help where to find this person? So a lead investor.
I think this is what we were talking about in terms of it. This is where you need to be. How do we get people that need this investment in front of people that have the money? And that's something that we need to maybe look at in the future, is to how do we get these people in front of companies that have these investments that want the funding. That's
right. You're definitely right, and that's definitely something that we can help with. So Tony, I put my email address in the chat. If you joined afterwards, sometimes you can't see it, but yeah, feel free to message me directly and we can talk offline. So yeah, it's good to know more about what you're working on. Right, Lewis has kindly put some details about the recovery loan scheme in. Can a retired person invest? Retired person not paying income tax. So you might have covered that actually.
Yeah, I think as far as I'm aware, they can invest it. It's open to anyone, really, this investment. And the retired person will be getting a pension, maybe a private pension, etc. So they'll be paying tax, and it'll just be doing their self-assessment to make sure that they get that money back.
Got it. So we haven't got any more questions, but I've got some. Okay. So you set up 3 years ago, and grateful to Luke Pulford. I don't know if he's on the call for the introduction. You work with, I think you may have said 80% of your clients are startup.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what does that look like in terms of, you know, what I'm thinking of, and again, you don't have to mention names obviously, but just some of the challenges that they face getting themselves investment ready. You know, maybe the timescales you should think about registering for SEIS, or maybe some of the more common themes that you've seen that, you know, they've fallen down because they haven't done X, Y, and Z.
I think the biggest thing is talking to someone, whether it's your accountant or someone that knows finances, in building the business plan and building the cash flow forecast and making sure that it looks viable as an investment. It's like watching Dragon's Den, where the people don't know the numbers, as it were, and the dragons aren't going to invest. And if you don't know the numbers and they're not kind of watertight, as it were, it's unlikely that anyone will invest. So that's the most important thing I'd say, is get a good accountant or get a good finance person involved to ask you probing questions in terms of when the revenue's due, when will the revenue kick in, when how much are we spending on, whether it's marketing or where you're going to spend the money, to make sure that there's a logic behind, one, getting the investment, and two, how you're going to spend it to future growth, to aid future growth.
Got it. And what's your opinion of the local, I want to say local, I mean Leicestershire startup scene? You know, is it vibrant? Is it growing? Is it, you know?
I think it's growing. Definitely. I think when we first started, one of the things that we tried to do as an initiative was find out how many companies started in a certain month, and that information is available on Companies House. And then we did a mail shot to every company that started in the Leicester area, and just that in 1 month was 600 companies.
Right.
And this was 3 years ago when we first tried to do that.
Yeah.
And of the 600 companies, we was one of them.
Right.
But I do think it's growing now, especially with COVID, where people have had time at home, not necessarily going to work and being furloughed. It's gave people that time to be able to think about other ways of generating money, generating revenue, and thinking of ideas. A couple of my friends have started businesses, and they wouldn't have done that if COVID hadn't happened, because they would have been so into going to work 9 till 7 or whatever hours they would work. They didn't have the time to invest in the side hustle, as they call it, that they have. I'd say it's definitely growing. Like, I'm based in the dock, which is for startup stroke tech businesses, and all our offices are full. In fact, they've opened Dock 2, which is a bigger office space, and they're building Dock 3 and 4. And we've got the science park, the space park, which isn't too far away from here as well. So it's definitely growing. I'd say it's definitely growing.
Sure. That's good to hear. And just switching slightly, so again, hypothetical, one of your startups approaches you, and maybe this hasn't happened, I don't know, but you know, or maybe you see actually these folks are growing. What networks are you aware of in our area? You know, angel syndicates, investor clubs. You know, can you give some examples of networks that you're aware of?
So in terms of the main kind of networking that we would do, and we have trusted advisors and trusted individuals that we partner with, rather than kind of network groups, as it were. But we've worked closely with the Innovation Hub at Leicester Uni before, and obviously we're working closely with Leicester Startups. And this is where I think there is a bit of a gap in the market for people that require investment to get in front of the people that have the money to invest. And I think that's what we've touched on before. And I think definitely if we could do something around that area, it would be very well received within the environment.
Got it. So I'm aware of a few high net worth individuals who have, you know, their friends, associates, but and there are, although at least there was, Angel's Den, and we've got the British Business Bank, and they've got investments in various, you know, on the quarter. So are you aware of any other groups? Maybe you're not allowed to talk about them, maybe they don't want to be, you know, discussed. It's confidential products, but so for anyone that's on the call now, any resources that you could point them towards in terms of investors or investor groups or clubs?
The only ones that I would know are for high net individuals, if that makes sense. You have to be a certain level of investor, not for anyone that's looking for micro investment.
Yeah, I think Lewis is putting more stuff in there. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Lewis. Right. As we started the call, I noticed Thomas joined us. I don't know if he's still here. Actually, I'm just checking he may have gone because I wanted to. He was on our accelerator program. Yes, he is. Thomas, are you with us?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to put you on the spot, I'm afraid, because this is like a live example. He went through our it finished on the 1st of April accelerator. And we don't have to go into the details now. You can see the demo day on our YouTube channel. But you're raising at the moment, aren't you, Thomas? Is that right?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. And I was wondering if you could, I'll put you on the spot, apologies if you don't feel comfortable. Just talk us through what that looks like from you, because you are SEIS registered and I think you do have a lead investor.
Yes. So our lead investor is actually a high net worth individual that invests usually in ticket size of 1 million and plus. So in order to actually get us to that stage, he's supporting as a guarantor a 2-year convertible note for every investor that would come in with 5% annual capital appreciation. So if the investor would stay over 2 years, over 2 years, of course, with a convertible note, they will get a discount over the next equity raise. But also they will, if they don't, they will get their money back. And if the startup fails, he will reimburse the money. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean that almost sounds too good to be true. Yeah.
That's why he's like really our lead investor, and he has 48 businesses under his umbrella. So he's a holding. He has a holding group. Founder of that holding group. We've been talking to him for a while. If you remember, that was the first one I was telling you about. So we got him. He's interested. Why? Because he wants to put all his 48 businesses on our startup, using the power of personal recommendation to actually promote their products and reduce all the inefficient campaigns, overspending on marketing, overspending on influencers. So while we're democratizing the recommendation or like the influencer scheme or the program itself, it actually allows businesses to completely outsource at the beginning when they start. A startup here, for example, myself, I would have outsourced completely the promotion of the product that I'm selling through friends, family, influencers, really established influencers. Get to the platform, let them bring you a revenue. And then later on, when you get to your scheme, when you get to your revenue that you want, you have enough money to go through the traditional marketing campaigns. You can put yourself on in the subways, use every marketing strategy there is. You can spend your own money on a better return on investment. So that actually really grabbed their attention and of the investor, and then he's more than happy to support it completely. I can communicate to anybody like the website of the investor. He's more than happy to back this up. And the accelerator we're going to be in is a high net worth individuals around him, his investor partners, and some companies. Will be around 6 months, 6 month program. After that, he does guarantee that we would get to the 1 million and up revenue scheme, revenue generating company.
So it's a convertible note is essentially a loan that converts into shares. So
At a discount rate, at a discount rate. So
yeah, for sure.
at a discount rate. So through the accelerator that we're going to be participating, and his support is going to be funding the next fundraise. And after the accelerator program, his plan, and ours in this case, is to raise 1 to 1.5 million through equity funding.
Okay.
So if the investor would actually participate in that 2-year convertible note, and he's still available or still on board till then, he would also get a discount on the valuation.
Sure. The bit I'm sorry, I'm being a bit ignorant. How can you guarantee to get people's money back to them?
So there will be contractual terms. We will also put it in writing, so he can actually really support it. He's really established. So if you go to his website, is DTM Holding Group. He has several businesses and even several business under his umbrella.
Got it. Bhavesh, have you come across that before?
That someone's guaranteeing the return.
Yeah.
I've seen it in the past, not necessarily SEIS EIS related, but I have seen it in the past where they'll guarantee a percentage return where it's backed by whether it's a high net worth individual or bigger kind of bank, as it were. But this does sound too good to be true, and I've made a note of it. I did put a question on the note just on the chat to say, do you have a minimum investment that you're looking at, or is it?
Yeah, it's 5,000 to 20,000 tickets investment. So 5,000 would be the minimum.
Okay.
Yes, and this is completely, I mean, that's a different than the SEIS EIS scheme.
Yeah.
Out of it. However, the next, our first equity round would actually be an EIS automatically, because it's more than a certain amount. So it's $1 million to 1.5 million, which qualifies to EIS scheme.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for agreeing to jump in, Thomas. Put you on the spot. Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you, Lewis, for all the additional info that you put in the chat. Is there anything else, Bhavesh, you want to share that you think people should consider? Any red flags? Anything else?
Not for me. I think just whether you're an investor or you want people to invest in your company, just make sure that you've looked at the finances and you've produced the finances with the help of someone, and you understand the finances. The worst thing in the world is either investing and not really understanding it and kind of making a loss and kicking yourself afterwards. So yeah, that would be my biggest takeaway.
Sure. And just on that, and I think I talked about it earlier, it's that sort of, the longer you wait, the safer the bet is, because hopefully they've got income, that you can see the growth. But of course, you've diluted you've got less of a stake in the company because you've waited longer.
Yeah, it just goes back to risk and reward again, isn't it?
Risk and reward, that's it. Yeah, well done. Yeah, thank you. Are there any resources you have given your clients, or you could point people towards? If they wanted to know, really dive into this and learn the granular stuff.
I'm happy to kind of have conversations. So anyone on the call or anyone on this call that does want a bit more detail, then just drop me an email, and I'm happy to kind of provide any kind of questions as that. We don't have any kind of material, as it were, on this, but I'm happy to have conversations with anyone in terms of if they do want a bit more detail.
And I would imagine there's something on the government website, because it's a government-backed scheme that they'll have. Yeah, great. Anyone else for questions before we wrap this session up? I think it's gone quiet on the chat, and I've covered everything Yeah, I would definitely like to connect with you again, Bhavesh, but we'll do that another time and
Yeah,
have a chat about what this investment club might look like.
yeah.
Okay, so we haven't got any more questions. Oh, no, sorry. One's just come in. Oh, yeah, Lewis, please refer to the bank's finance hub. Oh, okay, so I'm guessing that, yeah, of course, the British businessman will have a wealth of information on this as well. Yeah. Okay. So, folks, thank you for joining us. I can't see any more questions in the chat. Bhavesh, really grateful for your time. Lewis, if you're still on the call, for all the stuff you put in the chat, as always. And Thomas, for your impromptu, putting you on the spot. So thanks again, folks. Our next session is a pitch event that's slated for, I want to say it's the 8th of September, but we're going to publish it through Eventbrite shortly. And the British Business Bank are very kindly supporting us with that session. So if you are working, or rather, if you're at the early stages on a scalable business startup idea, you can connect with us through the website, through the social channels, or the Friday help desk sessions. You can find those again on our website or even Eventbrite. We would love to hear from you.